Hi there, Emily Midgett here with you today from 6th Street Sundries, and today I have a project using the new Thankful Magnolia stamp set that I actually illustrated for Simon Says Stamp's new April 2022 release. You can see it's a large 6x8 stamp set, and I created this really large magnolia kind of bouquet with some filler flowers and some really nice foliage, and it's got a huge bloom that's super fun to color. And today we're going to be working with the new OLO markers, which are the markers that I did kind of an introductory video for a few days ago that you can see if you look at my YouTube channel main page. And what we're going to do, we're going to color, I know magnolias are traditionally white, but there are also some really lovely kind of like a deep rosy mauve color of magnolia. And so I thought that's what we would color today. I'm going to start by stamping the Thankful Magnolia image with some Hero Arts intensified black ink. This is my favorite ink to use with alcohol markers and with watercolors too. It's great for using with both mediums. So I'm just stamping it with using my MISTI, and I do stamp it a couple of times just to make sure that we get a really crisp image because it is a large image and there's a lot of detail to it, so it helps to stamp it multiple times. Now the OLO markers that I'm using are R1.8, 5.7, 5.5, 5.3, and 5.1. Those are, I do have 5 markers. They're all from the red family. And I like to use kind of a variety of depths and gradations of color based on where the petal lies on the flower. You can see that this petal that's down, kind of down at the bottom of the flower and tucked underneath a couple of other petals, I'm going to use all 5 of those markers. I'm going to start with that darkest marker, that R1.8, and I'm going to push that color out with the lighter colors, starting from at 1.8 and working my way down to 5.7, 5.5, 5.3, and 5.1. Now I'm just going to continue working my way around the flower using that, starting with those back petals first. I find that it gives me a little bit better perspective on how dark to make things when I start with what I would envision as the petals that are the deepest in shadow. Because if you start dark with your markers, it makes it easier to see that visual contrast when you want to make those top petals a little bit lighter and a little bit less intense and a little bit less shadowed. So now we're moving on to kind of the second layer of petals, the petals that are a little bit further from the bottom. They're kind of in the middle layer. They're not quite the top and they're not quite on the bottom. So I'm going to start off with my second darkest color, my second darkest red shade. It's the 5.7, the R5.7, and I'm using that as my darkest shade, and starting off with that towards the center where the petals meet the center of the flower. They're kind of tucked underneath, and I am going to lay just a touch of that down, and then I push that color out with the subsequently lighter colors. I always work from dark to light. I find that that gives me the best results when I work from that darkest shade and then I push that color out with each of the lighter shades. And I do kind of go back over. There are the lightest color, the 5.1, it's very, very light. And so the alcohol ink in that lightest shade kind of, it kind of works almost too well in some respects. So it's easier when it's a little bit lighter, when it's still a little bit damp, when the alcohol is still a little bit damp, to go back in and kind of add a little bit of extra intensity on that 5.3, just to kind of blend it a little bit more smoothly. And as that alcohol ink dries, it kind of smooths out. It's almost magical the way it kind of smooths out on its own. You don't really have to do a ton of blending, because the more alcohol ink you put down, the more that color is going to move around. So just kind of trying to experiment and let it do its thing, and it'll move around on its own. So here again, I'm working with just that 5.7. I'm not using the darkest 1.8 shade, because this is another petal that's kind of in the middle. It's not on the very top and it's not on the very bottom. It's kind of in the middle. So we're just adding just the hint of a shadow with this one. So now you can see the finished magnolia bloom, and now we're going to work with the greens. Now I am not super particular when it comes to the greenery when it on a flower arrangement like this. I do just kind of some basic the same kind of recipe every time. What my main concern is making sure that each section of those leaves, each leaf has two sections, that vein down the center divides that leaf into two sections in my head. And so my goal is to make sure that each section of leaf has its own shadows, its own curvature. So when I am coloring leaves, that's my biggest goal, is to make sure that each leaf looks like each section of leaf looks like its own piece, its own petal, if you will. So again, I'm just starting with the darkest shade, that's the G 1.8, and I'm working my way down with the lighter shades, the YG 8.7, YG 8.5, YG 8.3, and I'm just pushing those colors out, starting with the darkest and working my way towards the lighter shades. And then with the lightest shade, I try to put as little ink as possible, just so that, because you do get a little bit of the white of the paper still coming through. So here we have the finished product. I have die cut it with the coordinating die for the Thankful Magnolia. I love that there is a coordinating die for these new stamp sets from this release, from this April 2022 release. So now I am just going to use the tin type stencil. I have a white 5x7 card base. This is a very large image. The Thankful Magnolia is a very large image, and I thought that that would be really fun to be able to do lots of different card sizes with it. You could kind of cut it and manipulate it. You can do the whole thing as I've done here. You can use the entirety of the image. And so I'm just going to show that huge image off by using creating a 5x7 card. I'm using the tin type stencil, which is a 6x6 stencil. It's a normal stencil size. And I'll show you how we kind of manipulate that because it's a repeating pattern, we're able to make that stenciled image extend beyond that 6 inches. I'm using, this is Merlot ink, and I'm using one of the Simon Says Stamp blending tools that came out. I think it was in the last release that one was released, these new blending tools. They're a very nice shape for your hand. So now I've flipped my card base over, my stenciled card base over, and I'm just lining up that tin type stencil. I've flipped it over and I'm lining up the tin type stencil so that the pattern extends beyond that that initial 6x6. So I'm just kind of, resetting it, and I didn't get quite enough of the card front covered with just that really light kind of fade. So I just had to go back and reset it and add a little bit more. And now to kind of bring out the depth and the shadows in the coloring on the Thankful Magnolia, I'm adding a little bit of solid Merlot and some solid deep purple blending on the edge, on the corner. So now to kind of bring out the kind of the white edge. That white edge normally really bothers me, but so in order to work with that, there's not really any way around it with die cuts. So I'm just going to splatter a little bit of white gouache onto the blended area on the card base, and that kind of helps to, you've heard of the rule of 3 when it comes to adding embellishments and adding different elements to your card. You want to have 3 because that is visually appealing. So when you add that little touch of white, it brings out the white edge and makes it look intentional. It brings out the white elements on the card base. Those little dabs of white gouache really help to kind of make your choices look intentional on your card front. So now I have some sentiments that I have stamped using black pigment ink from Altenew, and I've heat embossed them with some white pearlescent embossing powder. And I find that charcoal pearlescent embossing powder just really creates a nice, it's just a really unique look. It's better, I like it more than the traditional just plain black with clear embossing powder. So now it's time to assemble the main components of the card. Now we've got our sentiments ready to go. So I'm just going to add quite a bit of foam tape. I cut my foam tape into strips to make it last a little bit longer because it's expensive stuff. And I am going to place that full-size Thankful Magnolia die cut on my card front. And I'm going to use a double layer of foam adhesive. I'm going to make the thank section of the sentiment, it's going to be entirely on that already popped up Magnolia. So the you and the for thinking of me sentiment elements are going to have a double layer of foam tape to make them even with the thank. This is how neurotic my brain gets. I want all of the different elements to be the correct height so that they match the other elements, so that they are intentional. My cards, I try my best to make my cards look intentional. And so now it's just a matter of adding a few gems, some purple gems to kind of bring out that purple blending that we did. And there you go. It's all finished. So I hope you enjoyed this project. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me or leave a comment. And if you'd like to see more still shots and more projects from this April 2022 release from Simon Says Stamp, feel free to stop by my blog at emilymidgett.com. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.